I will hold your people in my heart. I, the Lord of snow and rain. I have borne my people's pain. I have wept for love of them. They turn away. I will break their hearts of stone. Give them hearts for love alone. I will speak my word to them. Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. I, the Lord of wind and flame. I will tend the poor and lame. I will set a feast for them. My hand will save. Finest bread I will provide, till their hearts be satisfied. I will give my life to them. Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. Thank you so much.
Hello, hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome all, one and all. Everyone come forward, come forward. Sorry? Inam? ما في microphone stand. Oh, you want the microphone? Nah, I mean, ask Matthew. I don't want one, but ask Matthew if he wants one. Look at that. Nice, nice. We got a turnout. I love it. I love to see it. Welcome all to another Friday night at Malak. Honestly, I can't. So we're quite diverse now. So who here is like finished school or has just finished school? You guys just finished? Congratulations. Amanda? No, Amanda, you're one of the older youth now. Uh, congratulations, guys. So now you have what, 4 months? 5 months? 4 months till uni, hey? Exciting, exciting. I was just talking to someone who just finished, and I was just saying how this is probably the best holiday you're gonna get because like you've just finished school and it's such a new experience. Like you've never had such a long time off, so make sure you make the most of it. And I don't know if you can travel or if you can do something. Enjoy this time, okay? And then the rest of us, I think the rest of you guys, what, at uni exams now? Is that what it is? Uni exams? Yeah, I can see Anna there nodding away. And then we have some older youth as well who are working. Nice to see the diversity. All right, so tonight, everybody, we're going to delve into the Gospels. Right now, I'm sure you guys are aware of the Gospels. I would be concerned if you didn't. You know that thing that we read every Sunday in the liturgy, and every week it's a different Gospel writer, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So tonight, Matthew will be. I actually have no idea what it's on about. So I'll just leave it for him. Matthew, if you want to come take the stage. And yeah, looking forward to the talk. Thank you very much.
Guys, if anyone has any question anytime, please, say. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So today we're actually going to be having a short talk about Panorama and the four Gospels. Today's session is actually going to be less spiritual, more educational. So we're going to be talking about the four Gospels in the next stage. Here, in the next slide, we have an outline that we want to cover. Hopefully we can cover it in as short as possible. All right, so we actually want to be speaking about the geography, so excuse my poor handwriting in the next slide. We just set a small map of the Palestine at the time of Christ. So firstly, we're going to be speaking about the geography in the Old Testament, linking both the Old and New Testament. Then we're going to be speaking about known characters with the same name. For example, Herod. You guys know Herod. We hear Herod at the time of Bethlehem. Then we hear Herod at the time of Christ. Then we hear Herod with John the Baptist. Then we hear Herod with the guy that was the cause of the martyrdom of James, the first disciple. Then we hear Herod at the time of Paul. Is it the same Herod? Is it different? We're going to be speaking about that. We're going to be speaking about different currencies in the Gospels. We hear about the shekels. We hear about drachma or dirham. In Arabic, drachma is in Greek. We hear about the denarius, which is in Roman. We hear about, like we said, shekels, coins, talents. We want to understand what these are all about. Okay. Hi, everyone. Then we're going to be speaking about different groups in the Bible, in the Gospels. For example, Samaritans, Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes. We're going to be chatting about them. And then we're going to be speaking, which is my favorite part about this, history of the events at the time of Christ. This will give us, hopefully, a clear idea. If I was to ask at the end, when did Christ speak about parables? Then you can say, oh, in the first stages of his service. When did Christ raise the dead? Or you'd say, no, it wasn't the first round, it was in the second round. Then we can say, when did Christ speak about him getting crucified and then resurrecting? You would say, no, it wasn't in the first, it was in the third stage. When did Christ heal the Gentiles? Hopefully at the end of this, we can actually have a clear idea. All right. Like I said, forgive the poor handwriting. We actually want to be covering a map of Palestine at the time of Christ. I'm going to be zooming in. So this is Palestine at the time of Christ. It can be split. Let's look at the left and right side first. We'll look at the east, then the west. So Palestine is actually on the left-hand side. It's all covered by the Mediterranean Sea, the whole way through. And then on the right-hand side, we have three collections of waters. The first collection is the Sea of Galilee, and that's where the disciples used to go for fishing. The second water collection is River Jordan, and that's where John used to baptize. And the third collection is the Dead Sea, and that's at the bottom. That's the south of Palestine. Out of this map, if we can get something out of today, we want to understand the geography of when we see Christ. Where did he start with his service? Did he start in the north? Did he start in the south? Then if he started in the south, where does he go? Why does he start at the south? We want to understand all of this. Three main cities we want to cover today. Three main cities. North is Galilee, and he's known as the Christ of Galilee. Next one, in the middle part, is Samaria, and the next part is Judea. So we'll have a short word on each one of them, Galilee, Samaria, and then Judea. So, where are we? Okay, so let's take a bit of basics on each one of them. So Judea, we'll start from the south, is considered the religious people used to live there. The rich people used to live there. Bethlehem is there. The Jerusalem is there. The temple, Solomon's temple is there. That's in the bottom. That's in Judea. That's where the Pharisees live. That's where all the rich people live. If we go to the next part, in the middle part of the map is Samaria, and these are often called the rejected people. They're actually not even called Jews. They're called the rejected people because at the time of captivity, back then when there was the Assyria, Babylon, Greece, Persia, and Rome, at the time of captivity, the middle part of Palestine here, which is Samaria, they mixed with the nations. So their descendants are actually considered impure, and hence Samaria or the Samaritans are actually considered the rejected people. So really, the accepted people, we're talking about the north and the south. So it's at south, Judea, that's where the rich, religious, Pharisees, Sadducees, it's where everyone who is religious and fanatic, they used to live there. Samaria, rejected. Up high, which is the north Galilee, that's actually that's the Mount Druid of the area. That's pretty much the Mount Druid. So, forgive me for saying that. So Galilee is actually where people would run away. For example, like anyone who would run away from being caught or put into prison, they would actually go to Galilee because there's forests there. This is where you have the average and the below average people living, up in Galilee. Let's cover a few areas in each one of them. So, a quick, interesting fact about the Samaritans, they actually, in our Bible, they only believe in 5 books. Do you guys know what 5 books they are? Only 5 books. The Samaritans, what are they? Starts with T. The Torah. The Torah. They only believe in the 5 books of Moses, nothing else. Psalms, wisdom, nothing. They only believe in the Torah. And until our day today, there's actually Samaritans in the world. They actually have a site online. There's actually about 200 of them. 200 Samaritans still around the world. All right, so they only, like we said, believe in the 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's the only thing they believe in. All right, so we spoke about Galilee. If I was to ask anyone now, rich people, where do they live? Where? Judea, at the bottom. Poor people or average people, where do they live? Galilee, up north. Rejected people, where? Samaria. Beautiful. All right. I'm going to give you quick 3 interesting facts about the geography. So Christ, let me just see if I can move this a little bit so I can read the notes. All right. So Christ actually lived most of his time, where do you guys think? In Galilee or in Judea? Where was Christ born? North or south? South. He was born in Bethlehem, right? Where did he live most of his life? Where did he live most of the life? Do you guys think in Galilee or in Judea? Galilee. Where in Galilee specifically? It's up there, up north. Where in Galilee specifically did he live? Nazareth. And he was called Jesus of Nazareth. So Christ actually lived most of his time up in the north, in Galilee. During his service time, which is the last 3.5 years of his life, he spent it more in Capernaum, up there next to the Sea of Galilee, where Mount Tabor is. Up there on the right-hand side, that's where he spent most of his 3.5 years of service. But his first 30 years especially, he lived mostly around Nazareth, up in the Galilee, in the average. And there's actually, when Christ went out to call his disciples, when he went out to call Nathanael, and when he called Philip, Nathanael said to him, really? Out of Nazareth can come something good? Out of Nazareth, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And then later on, when the Pharisees go to put hands on him, and they have a chat with Nicodemus, the Pharisee, what do they say? Did any prophet come out of Nazareth? No prophet came out of Nazareth before. So what we want to find out today is actually to prove that point wrong. To prove, no, some prophets came out of Nazareth. It was only, or out of Galilee. It wasn't only Christ. Before Christ, some prophets came. So let's see. All right. Anything else? Yes, okay. One more interesting. I have a question. Saint Mary and Saint Joseph, the carpenter, where do you guys think they are from? North or south? Galilee or Judea? Where are they from? Where were they originally from? Judea. Why? How do we know that? Can anyone tell me how do we know that? No, something else. The consensus. Remember the consensus at the time of the birth of Christ? They went down for the consensus. So we know they're actually from the south, from Bethlehem. But they lived again most of their life in Nazareth. That's why when Archangel Gabriel appeared to yeah. That's why when Archangel Gabriel actually appeared to tell her the good tidings or the good news, he went to a virgin in Nazareth to proclaim to her the good news. And then he told her, blessed are you, and the rest of it. Okay. Christ had how many disciples? Christ had how many disciples? 12. 11 of them were from a poor region. So where were they from? From Galilee, Samaria, or Judea? Galilee. Only one of them was from sort of a rich family. And in Arabic, it's actually from a family called Iskariyut. So who is he? Only one disciple was from the south. Who was it? Judas. Judas Iscariot. So 11 of Christ's disciples, 11 of them were actually based in up north, Nazareth, Galilee, up north. Only one who is meant to come from a religious family and everything is from the south, is Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. So let's go back to a bit of geography. I'm sorry it can be a bit boring, but we'll try to go through. We actually want to break down all the X's are the cities as part of Galilee, and then the brown triangles are the mountains that we actually want to focus on. The mountains are actually going to tell us to prove the point of the Pharisees when they said, did a prophet come out of Judea? Did a prophet come out of Galilee? We'll find out. So, like we said, in Galilee, if we come, I'll just take this off. Up north, on the right-hand side, if we look at Capernaum, we said in the 3.5 years of service of Christ, he spent most of the 3.5 years in Capernaum. If we go to Cana of Galilee, what do we know about the Cana of Galilee? It was Christ's first miracle, which was turning the water into wine at the wedding of Cana of Galilee. If we go a little bit to the left, Nazareth, and we know that Christ actually spent most of his 30 years up in Nazareth. What we want to cover is Mount Carmel, Mount Tabor, and Mount of Beatitudes. We want to understand a little bit more. So, Mount Carmel, whose story is mentioned in Mount Carmel? Sorry, Maria? Elijah. Elijah's story is actually in Mount Carmel. And we know when he had the Bible study people, saying oneness, they know that Elijah was actually from Mount Carmel. And hence, who is after Elijah? All I'm saying here is I'm trying to prove what the Pharisees said, we've never seen a prophet that came out of Galilee. Nobody ever came. Did anything good come out of Galilee before? Did anything good come out of Nazareth? So, if we look up there in the Galilee, the whole region, where the dot line is above Samaria, so Mount Carmel is Elijah. Something good came out of Nazareth before the time of Christ. Who came after Elijah? Who was his descendant? Elisha. Something good came out of Nazareth in Galilee. After that, it is known in the tradition of the church that the son or the boy that Elijah raised from the dead, who was he? Jonah. So something good came out of Galilee. Now, let's move to the right-hand side, Mount Tabor. What do we know about Mount Tabor? It's the Mount of Transfiguration, right? Also in the Old Testament, it is known that Mount Tabor is actually where Abraham met Melchizedek. That's where he met him. And then it was after he saved Lot that Abraham met him at Mount Tabor. And then Melchizedek is a symbol of who? Christ. He's a symbol of Christ. Thank you, Maria. He's a symbol of Christ. So we know that Melchizedek is a symbol of Christ. We know that he's a symbol of Christ because after Abraham saved his nephew, Lot, he went up to Mount Tabor and he met this guy who came out of nowhere called Melchizedek. And then Melchizedek gave him the what? The bread and wine. And what did he take from him? Tithes. Who can offer the bread and wine except Christ was the first one to do this, right? From Melchizedek's time was the first one to offer the bread and wine. And who can accept tithes except from God? So he was a symbol of Christ, Melchizedek. If we go down to the mountain of Beatitudes, what do we know about the mountain of Beatitudes? Why is it called the mountain of Beatitudes? Do you guys remember the Sermon on the Mount of Christ, Matthew 5? That mountain of Beatitudes. So all the cool, nice stuff happened where? Up in Galilee. That's where most of the things happened. Up in Galilee. Okay, now let's go down to Samaria, Mount Gerizim and Mount Abal. Mount Gerizim and Mount Abal. Do you guys remember the time of Joshua? When Joshua went through the river Jordan with the people behind him. And then Joshua split the people and then he taught them the blessings and the curses. He pretty much read for them word for word the law of Moses. Word for word. It was actually in between them two, Mount Gerizim and Mount Abal. And that's why it's actually believed, that's why the Samaritans believe that it is at Mount Abal that worship is due. That's why in the Samaritan woman, she told him, should we worship in this mountain or the mountain down there in Judea? Which one should we worship? And Christ, what did he tell her? Neither in this mountain nor in the other mountain. For God is spirit and he who should be worshipped in spirit and truth. Right? So Mount Abal, Samaritans believe that this is where worship is due. We're nearly done with the geography. We're nearly done. All right. Let's go down to the bottom to Judea. Let me just try to zoom in a little bit. Does anyone have any questions so far? Any questions? No? Okay. Because Abuna can answer your questions. All right. Is this a bit clearer? Let me zoom in. All right. So at the bottom, Judea, which is where the rich people are, which all the religious people also are. Judea, we're going to cover a few places. So up here on the left-hand side, Emmaus. We're in the time of the resurrection, the two disciples of Emmaus. Going down, Hebron. Do you guys know who is buried in Hebron? 4 main characters. Do you guys know who? 4 main characters. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Sarah, Abraham's wife. They're actually buried down in Hebron. If we go to the right-hand side, and this is actually one of the interesting facts. If we go to the right-hand side, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is actually a city that is set on 4 mountains. Mountain number 1, Temptation, Olives, Moriah, and Golgotha. That's why in the story of the Good Samaritan, it said, and a certain man was coming down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Why does the Bible say coming down? Is it all level? No. Jerusalem is actually set up on 4 mountains. That's why it's a bit higher. And often when something is high and you go down and there's forests, that's where the thieves are sitting there, lingering around. So when the Bible says certain man was coming down from Jerusalem to Jericho, because Jerusalem is actually set at 4 mountains. Jerusalem, we know about it. Let's cover the 4 mountains, then we'll go to Jericho, and we're done from the geography part of things. And I'll explain why we're doing the geography now. Mount Temptation. It's also called Mount Karantal. Why is it called Mount Temptation? What happened in it? What happened in it? Sabah khair, huh? Christ's temptation for 40 days and 40 nights. If we go down to the bottom, Mount Olives. What happened in Mount Olives? And I want someone to tell me from the New Testament and from the Old Testament, if possible. In the New Testament, what happened in Mount Olives recently? What happened? 5 loaves and 2 fish? No, something else. Something else. Mount Olives, what happened? Passion Week. Covenant Thursday night. What happened? Huh? Yeah, that's where Judas betrayed Christ, in Mount Olives. That's where Christ was praying and Judas betrayed him. Now the same thing, it's actually called Mount Olives, and it's actually also called the Mount of Betrayal. Why is it called the Mount of Betrayal? Even before Jesus. Because in the Old Testament, in Samuel, at the time of David, this is the mountain where David went up to, and he sang for us, or he wrote for us, Psalm 3. Lord, why have they increased those who seek my soul, or those who, I don't know in English, trouble me, or persecute me? Why have they increased those who trouble me, or persecute me? Why? Why did he have those feelings at that time? Because his son Absalom wanted to seek his life. And actually the people betrayed him. And his minister Achitophel, went against him. So he went to us in Mount Olives, same thing, same betrayal. And he sang for us Psalm 3. In the New Testament, many, 1,500 years later, Christ is there getting betrayed. Now let's go Mount Moriah. What's actually in Mount Moriah? The temple of Solomon. That's why the Samaritan woman, when she was telling him, where should we worship? Is it Mount Abal or Mount Moriah? Is it that mountain or the mountain down in Judea? Where should we worship him? Last one, Mount Golgotha. Mount Golgotha. What happened in Mount Golgotha? The crucifixion. Why is it called Golgotha? What does Golgotha mean? Skull. Skull. Well done. There's actually, the first tradition is that because apparently from far away, it looks like a skull. But it actually has another tradition. In the tradition of the Israelites, in the Jews, there's actually another tradition. Who is believed to have been buried at the bottom of Mount Golgotha? Adam. Well done, David. Adam. Adam is actually believed to have been buried at the bottom. That's why Adam the first, who died in sin, came Adam the second, which is our Lord Jesus Christ, and was crucified up on the mountain to save us and to save the old Adam from the death of sin. So why we did this? Why we did this? Because now when we go to actually not the next part, the last part, when we come to talk about the history and about the rounds of Christ in service and the rounds of Christ in what he did. Sorry, Chris. Sorry? It's actually in traditions. It's not in the Bible. Just tradition of the Jews. That's actually a belief. The other belief is that it looks like a skull. But where exactly? I don't know. I don't know. Good question. All right, let's go to the next part. All right, sorry, let's recap this really quickly. Let's recap this slide really quickly. So Palestine is split to 3 main cities. On the left-hand side, we have the Mediterranean Sea. On the right-hand side, we have 3 collections of waters: Sea of Galilee, River Jordan, and the Dead Sea. Left-hand side, or the Mediterranean Sea. We split Palestine to 3 at the time of Christ. North is Galilee, where Christ spent most of his life, 33 and a half years, most of his life. Samaria, in the middle part, and they are considered the rejected people. Lastly, Judea, which is actually where the rich, where the religious, where the high people of the high people of the congregation used to live. Down south, in Judea. Let's go to the next slide. Now, in the next slide, we actually, and we're going to come back to this a bit later on. In the next slide, we actually want to cover the confusion behind the many Herods that we have. In fact, we sometimes ask ourselves, there's Herod, the one that killed, like I said earlier, the one that killed the children of Bethlehem, the massacre of the innocent. And then there's Herod at the time of Jesus, and the one that beheaded John the Baptist. Then we have another Herod who killed the first disciple, or martyred the first disciple, James. Then we have Herod who was in the trial of St. Paul. Let's cover them quickly. The first Herod that we have, in fact, there's 4 of them. In the Gospels, there's actually 4 Herods. The first Herod is actually known as Herod the Great. I'm going to ask a silly question, but at that time of Christ, the captivity of Palestine and the surrounding regions, which empire Which captivity? Rome. Okay? So at that time, when Herod the Great was actually assigned, the head of the Roman Empire was Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar. And he assigned Herod the Great, which is the guy on the left-hand side, he assigned Herod the Great over all of Palestine. All of it. In between the both waters, he looked after everything. Herod the Great had two main things that he did. The first thing, to please the Jews, he actually renewed the temple for them. The temple of Solomon. So who built the temple of Solomon? Solomon. And then when the captivity happened, it got wrecked. It got wrecked. So who went back to renew it again? Starts with Z. Who went back to renew it? Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel actually went to renew it. And then in the recent ages, over the years, it got wrecked again. And then Herod the Great actually fixed it again. Herod the Great also is the one that when he heard from the Magi that the king of the Jews is born, and then he told them, tell me when he comes so I can go back to worship him. They didn't go back because an angel appeared to the Magi and said, don't go back. Don't go back to Herod. So what did he do? He sent out a decree. Anyone, any male, 2, and under the age of 2, kill them. So he is actually the one responsible for the massacre of the innocent in Bethlehem. After he died, the kingdom got split. Sorry. After he died, the kingdom got split as we see here. So he got split to Galilee, Samaria, Judea, and also on the right-hand side, upright, we have Caesarea Philippi. So after he died, the kingdom got divided into Herod Antipas, which is the one that we actually want to focus on. He looked after Galilee only. What did Herod Antipas do? He is the one that after he got Mary from the drinking and the dancing, and then when his niece asked him and danced for him, and he told her, ask me anything, even half of the kingdom, and she asked for the head of John the Baptist, he is the one that beheaded John the Baptist. Herod Antipas. And he actually also is the one, when Pontius Pilate knew that Christ was a Galilean, he said, I don't want to be involved in this. Send him to Herod. So Herod Antipas, which is the second Herod, he is the one that was John the Baptist and the trial of Christ. Then after that, many years later, and that's in the Acts of the Apostles, we get Herod Agrippa I and Herod Agrippa II. We don't have to worry too much about them, but Herod Agrippa I is the one that actually killed St. James, and he imprisoned John and Peter. And then after he died, we have Herod Agrippa II, and that's where Paul went to for his decree. All right. Does anyone have any questions about the Herods? Is that a bit clear? So we know what we should know. Each Herod is actually different to the other. Each Herod, it's not the same Herod from the time of Bethlehem all the way to Paul. It's 4 different Herods. They're 4 different. Okay? Any questions? All right. Let's now, as we guys, for the people who came a bit later, this is the outline quickly that we want to go through. So we want to talk about the geography, which we covered. We want to talk about the known characters who cause confusions, the names, like Herod. Then we want to talk about the different currencies at the time of Christ in the 4 Gospels. And then we want to talk about different groups of people, different denominations for the Gospels. And then lastly, which is the most exciting part, is the history of events of Christ's service. All right. So we covered the first 2. Let's quickly talk about the different currencies that we have in the Gospel. Different currencies. To start off with, we have a few. We have the denarius, which is a Roman currency, which was used at the time everywhere. Then we have the coin or drachma, or in Arabic called dirham. This was actually used, this was the Greek money. Then we have shekel, and that's the interesting one. And then we have talents. So quick maths. 1 denarius equals to 1 drachma or 1 dirham. Easy. 1 dinar equal to 1 drachma. 1 shekel or 1 shekel over there, I put it as unknown. Why? What was the shekel? What was it? Jewish. Perfect. Shekel was actually Jewish money. And it was the local money that was used mainly at the temple. So when the people would want to go and offer a sacrifice, they can't actually buy the sacrifices with the drachma or the denarius. They can't do that. So the Jews are very, very smart. So what they would do, they would go into the temple to the money changes, and then they have to change their money from your pounds to the Australian dollar or whatever. So the pounds at that time is the denarius, and the dollar is the shekel. Every day, it can change. In a minute, it can change, depending on the person in front of them. If the person is rich, if the person is really rich, they see he's rich, then it will say, look, for the 1 shekel, you need to pay us 100 dinar. If they see the person in front of them, they can't win too much out of him, they'll say, for the 1 shekel, give us 1 dirham or 1 dinar. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So to buy a sacrifice that is going to be accepted, to buy an acceptable sacrifice, you had to buy the sacrifice in the temple by shekels. So you had to go to the money changers. And that's why what happened when Christ went to the temple, what did he do? He flipped the tables of the money changers. He flipped the tables because he knew what they were doing. Nothing was right that was done. If the guy is rich or whatever, I can make use of him, so I'll get 1 shekel for 100 dinar. If a guy is average, I'll get 1 shekel for 5 dinar. That's wrong. That's why Christ flipped the tables and told them, my house is a house of prayer and you have made it a den of thieves. A den of thieves. Now quickly, we actually want to cover a talent. Before we cover the talent, I'll give you 2 interesting ideas. Let me cover the talent first. Okay, a talent is actually roughly 1,000 dinari or dinaris, whatever. That's why in the parable of the parable of the talents, we know a servant. The master gave a servant 5 talents, and gave a second one 2 talents, and gave the last one 1 talent. The guy with the 5 talents went, invested, and then he got him 5 extra. The 2 talents went, invested, and got him 2 extra. The one with the 1 talent told him, I know you reap where you didn't sow. So what I did, I don't want to get in trouble. I dug your talents. I hid it. That's why the master told him, what? You lazy servant. Lazy servant, of course. Do you guys know back in the time, a worker, how much they wage in a day? A worker, how much is their wage a day? 1 dinar. 1 dirham. The master gave the guy 6,000 dinari that he went to dig, that he went to cover, that he didn't invest. See guys, something like this would solve some of our what does that mean? What's a talent? 6,000. Imagine 6,000 days of work. The master's telling you, go invest, go make more. In one day, the dowry of a lady or of a girl back in the day, you guys know how much was it? 10. 10 dinars. 10. Only 10. So this is a big amount. 6,000 dinar is a very big amount. This can sort of explain to us, do you guys know the parable of the lost coin? The widow, that when she lost 1 coin, what did she do? She was very upset and she was looking for it, right? This can explain to us that maybe she has finished all her money, being widow, being poor. The only thing that was left for her was her dowry, the 10 coins. That's why she really looked for it. Any questions so far? Anything so far? All right. Sorry? All right. Next part that we want to cover is the different denominations in the Gospels. Different denominations. So we know a few of them. We know Sadducees, we know the scribes, and we know the Pharisees. Who were the Sadducees? Who were the Sadducees? What was the highest person, the highest person that graduates from them? What were they called? Who were the Sadducees? Anyone tell me? Sadducees, who were they? They were actually the person that would graduate from the whatever college or whatever, would be the high priest, the head priest. They were Sadducees. Do you guys know that the Sadducees do not believe in the resurrection of the dead? Do you guys believe that? Actually, I thought, like it said in the Bible clearly, but I think I read it recently when I was preparing. Do you guys know Sadducees do not believe in the resurrection of the dead? And the Sadducees were considered the head priests. They were part of the temple of God. Annas and Caiaphas, who went and judged Christ. Do you guys believe? They did not believe in resurrection. But obviously, they don't believe in resurrection, they're going to believe in Christ. I thought this was crazy. Sadducees who are like, can you guys imagine, like for example, one of our priests or whatever does not believe in resurrection of the dead? What is this? What's the religion then? What are we doing? Next is the scribes, and actually the biggest one of them is called the rabbi or rabbi, the rabbi. The scribes were responsible to copy the Torah, to copy the Bible, to copy them. They were very strict. Actually, they would read, after they copied everything, they would read letter for letter to make sure that it's the exact same. If one letter was different, burn the whole thing. Start one more time. After they copy the whole page, if one letter was missing, burn the whole thing. Don't even look for it to correct it. Burn the whole thing and start all fresh. These were the scribes. And maybe it's a really good thing that they were like that strict, because they would give us a highly accurate Bible, a super accurate Bible, that nothing was changed throughout the time. And we know that through the Holy Spirit, nothing was changed. It's the same from the beginning all the way till now. All the way to the end. Not a single word of my words will go away. Last part is the Pharisees. And this is one of the interesting ones. The Pharisees actually, I made a whole slide for them only. There's actually 7 kinds of Pharisees. 7 kinds of Pharisees. And I thought this was funny. So you guys probably can't read it. So there's 7 different kinds of Pharisees. The first Pharisees, the first group is called the shoulder Pharisees. The shoulder. Do you guys know the cops, how they have something on their shoulder? And the higher they get in rank, the more stars or whatever they have, stripes. These Pharisees would, same thing on their shoulder, but then they would write down their good deeds on their shoulder to show everyone. These are my good deeds on their shoulder. The second one is they called the wait a little Pharisees. They would do anything to delay a good deed. They would do anything. And that's, by the way, guys, this is not a joke. These are serious groups. This is like serious research on this. The third kind, which I found the funniest, they called the bruised Pharisees. The bruised Pharisees. What they would, and it was a sign of I'm increasing in my religion, I'm increasing in my spiritual level. What they would do is that they would walk with the head like this, and then walk into wars, and then bleed. And that was a sign of religious. I'm increasing in my spirituality. Why they did that? They said, because we didn't want to see any women. We didn't want to sin. So what they would do, walk into wars, have bruises all over their face, all over their body, and that was a sign of spirituality and righteousness. Beautiful. They're called the bruised Pharisees. Next one is called the hunched over Pharisees, who pretendingly hunch over their back like this so they don't look. Next is called the ever reckoning, and they always count their good deeds. They always count their good deeds to offset the bad deeds. In fact, their deeds, the good or the bad, is not they please God, they didn't please God. No. It's actually more about the tithes. That's why Christ told them, you give tithes on the mint, on the small things, but you forget the good. You forget the word of God. If they feel like we have cheated, we forgot the small mint, they wouldn't eat for that day. They wouldn't eat. If they found that we have cheated a little bit in the tithes, they wouldn't eat. George.
I would imagine that these categories are to modern sort of understanding of how they behaved as a group. So there's the Pharisees, right? They're very, very proud of their education and strictness of faith and stuff like that. But these are the types of behaviors that later on they were grouped in. This is how this group behaves, that group behaves. Yeah. But it's not the formal titles that were given to them at the time.
And actually the next part, in the last part, when we come to speak about the history of the service of Christ, we're actually going to cover this part. So in the third part, in the third round of Jesus in his sort of service, when he went to give the words to the Pharisees, he split the words into about 7 different types. So woe to you, because instead of showing people, instead of being humble, you go putting this on your shoulder, my good deeds, and you wear your long gowns and wear bitabahi, like proud in the middle of the people. And then he tells them, woe to you, because you give tithes on the mint and the small things, tahsuh. And then you don't actually, you forget the word of God. We're going to cover this in a second. But like Abuna said, it wasn't like, they wouldn't make fun of their sons like this. No, it wouldn't be as bad. Number 6 and number 7 are actually the good Pharisees. So they're actually the fearful, God-loving Pharisees. And this actually, one of them is considered Simon the Pharisees, who invited Christ over to his house. They're actually God-loving people. These 2 different types. And they're very fearful. They're very scared of doing the wrong thing. Taban, we should be scared of doing the wrong thing, but at the same time, we always remember God's mercy. So number 6 and number 7, they are the good people, which Simon the Pharisee is considered one of them, even though when the woman came the leg of Jesus, he judged her. But they still considered the good kind of Pharisees. The good. All right. My favorite part of this, which is the history of events of the service of Christ. We said, how many years did Christ live on earth? How many years? 33 and a half. 33 and a half Christ lived on earth. The first 30 years of Christ's life on earth, the first 30 years, we only know a few things out of it. We don't know much out of it. What do we know about the first 30 years before Christ got baptized? What do we know? We only know small key things. What do we know? Huh? No, before that, in the first 30 years, what do we know? Birth? Carpentry, yes. We don't. Is that a tradition, or is that actually in the Bible, the carpentry? So it was, let's be assumed, yeah. That's one of the things that we know. Yeah, when he was a kid, yes. We actually know about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events. We know the birth. We know the shepherds, when they went to see him. We know the Magi, also known as the wise men, when they went to visit him. We know the flee to Egypt, when the angel appeared to St. Joseph and say, flee with the woman and the child, flee to Egypt. And the last thing that we know, when he was 12 years old, and that was the tradition at the time, when they hit 12, you take them to the temple so they can teach the child the Torah. They can teach the child the book of God. But he was actually teaching them.
Yeah, so it's known as the bar mitzvah, like becoming an adult.
What's it called?
Bar mitzvah.
Bar
Yeah.
mitzvah. Bar mitzvah. So, only 5 things: birth, shepherds, Magi, or the wise men, flee to Egypt, and the bar mitzvah. Bar mitzvah. All right. Other than that, we actually don't know too much. We don't know anything out of that. And then we come to here when Christ went to get baptized by John the Baptist. That's the first thing we know. That's why we actually want to split the service of Christ into 5 groups. 5 groups. The first one, beginning of the service. The second, third, and fourth, we can call it like Paul's trips. We can call it round 1 of service, round 2 of service, round 3 of service, and then the last thing is the end of service. Split it again. Beginning, then round 1, 2, and 3, then end of service. A rule of thumb. Before Christ went on any of those, the first thing he would do is he would go to the temple and attend the Passover. Where was the temple? Yalla Q&A. Where was the temple? Galilee, Samaria, or Judea? Huh? Judea. So, easy. So where does Christ have to start first? If he was to do any of those rounds, where does he start out of this? He would start actually down the bottom in Judea, in Jerusalem, and then go up. Has to go past Samaria. He can't jump over Samaria. So go past Samaria and then go up to Galilee. And then round 1 of the service, start from the bottom in the Passover. In Judea, go to Samaria, then go to Galilee. Round 2, round 3, all the way through. Always, rule of thumb, Christ would always start any of those rounds with the Passover. Has to. It's a must. I just get the paper because it's a bit hard, this paper. All right. Sorry. All right. So let's talk about the beginning of the service. So the first thing that Christ did was he went to the south, Judea/Samaria, to get baptized by John the Baptist. That's the beginning. That's not round 1. He hasn't started his service yet. So he went down, then he got, let me go back. Sorry. There we go. So Christ went down, got baptized, then he went to Mount Temptation, which is up there next to the word Judea. Mount Temptation, down bottom. And then he went back to Galilee. That's the beginning of the service. Beginning of the service started with the baptism. That's not the round yet. Started with the baptism. Then he went through. Sorry, I'm going to be a bit blank. All right. Started with the service. Then he attended like 40 days and 40 nights. He was in Mount Temptation, Mount Carmel, and then he went up to Galilee. When he went up to Galilee, that was his first miracle that he performed, which was what? The wedding at the Cana of Galilee. And then before that, he went to the right-hand side to the Sea of Galilee and picked his first 4 disciples. Who were the first 4 disciples? Simon Peter and Andrew, James and John. Simon Peter, Andrew, James and John. That was the beginning of the service. He hasn't started service yet. That's why when St. Mary told him, do the miracle, he told her, my time hasn't come yet to do a miracle. But he did it for her. And then, so this is the beginning of the service. Now let's start the rounds. This one, it gets a bit interesting. Round 1, round 2, and round 3, it's like an escalator. It's like Christ every year gets higher and higher. It's very strategic. It's very smart. And I think we should actually definitely get this in our service. You never start too hard from the beginning. You start gradually. So round 1, where does he have to start? Judea for the Passover. So, thank you. So, Passover first thing. So, he goes down south to Judea for the Passover. He attends the Passover, and over there in Judea, he meets Nicodemus. He meets Nicodemus for the first time. And then goes from Nicodemus, has to go past Samaria, when he is there in Samaria, who does he meet? The Samaritan woman. And then he finishes with Samaria, and then he goes up. That's the first round. And then he picks his disciples. In the first round, he picks the rest of the disciples. So in the beginning of the service, he only picked 4. In round 1, the first year of service, that's when he picked the remainder of the disciples, and that's when he started preaching. He started going into the synagogues, but he was declined. He was refused. So what did he do? He went out in open spaces and speaking to people in parables. Started healing many sicknesses. Many sicknesses. Not the super ones, but just like blind, open their eyes, lame, get them up. Simple stuff. Although it's in our terms, it's not simple. But for Christ, simple stuff. Many miracles. This is round 1. So let's recap a little bit quickly. Beginning of the service, goes down to Judea, attends the Passover, gets baptized, then goes all the way up to Galilee, and then he picks his first 4 disciples, who are Simon Peter and Andrew, James and John. Then he round 1 of the service, goes down to Judea, starts in the Passover in Jerusalem, then he goes through to Samaria. That's where he meets a Samaritan woman, and then he goes up to Galilee, and over there he picks the first 12 disciples, or the remainder of the 12, which are the 8. Any questions so far? Any questions? Okay. Round 2, the intensity now goes a little bit higher. So round 2, again, round 2, we actually start in the south, and then he is Christ when he healed the lame of Bethesda. Bethesda, it's called? Bethesda, yeah. So round 2 is Christ actually started in the south with the Passover, and then he heals the paralyzed person of Bethesda. That, by the way, do you guys remember his story? Where the angel comes once a year, and then he touches the water, and whoever gets in first gets it? There's actually a tradition that says, I think that's from the Chosen. There's a tradition that says that paralyzed guy of Bethesda was actually the brother of Philip the disciple. So a tradition. Like if you ask me where from, the Chosen. I'm not 100% sure. So don't take it any word for it. It's not Bible. Anyway, so Christ goes down. Round 2 starts with the Passover. Heals the sick of Bethesda on the Sabbath. So now the Jews are getting angry with him. Getting very angry with him. So Christ finishes from Judea. He leaves them kind of angry by themselves. And then he goes up. Samaria finished. Goes up to Galilee. And that's when we go to intensity number 2. Round number 2. Instead of speaking to the people in parables now, no. Now he's speaking in the mountains. And that's when he goes to the mountain of Beatitudes and tells the Sermon on the Mountain. And now we speak about parables of the kingdom of heaven. So now we go one higher. We don't just speak about simple parables like, for example, the prodigal son. No. Now we're talking about the kingdom of heaven. And now we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you. He's getting them ready. Even for his crucifixion. He's getting them slowly ready. Now in this part, the 12 disciples are ready. Round number 2, 12 disciples are picked in round number 1. Round number 2, Christ sends them away for service. The 12 disciples sends them away for service. In terms of miracles, now we go one level higher. So instead of just healing the lame, opening the eyes of the blind, no, now we go a little bit higher. Now when we do supernatural things, like for example, calming the storm. Like for example, raising the dead. That's round number 2. So Christ slowly gets them acquisited to his nature. Slowly starts showing them. That's round number 2. Should we recap or leave it for later? Recap quickly. Beginning of the service. So we're going to split the service of Christ, the 3.5 years, to 5 things. Beginning of service, round 1, round 2, round 3, end of service. Beginning of service starts down bottom with the baptism, Passover, and then baptism, and then Christ gets tempted, and then he goes up to Galilee, and then he does the Cana of Galilee, the wedding at the Cana of Galilee, the first miracle, and then he picks his 4 disciples. That's the beginning of service. Round 1, down bottom, in Judea. What does Christ start with in round 1? Round 1. Who does he pass over? And then who does he meet? Nicodemus. He meets Nicodemus, goes past Samaria, meets a Samaritan woman, has that life-changing conversation with her, and then he goes up to Galilee, and that's when he picks the remainder of the 12 disciples, and that's when he starts preaching to the people in the synagogues. Then they kick him out and starts preaching to people in open air, in parables and simple terms. Then round 2, he has to start in Judea, has to start down south for Passover. Christ starts with the Passover, Then he heals the sick of Bethesda, the lame. And then the Jews get really angry with him. How can you treat in the Sabbath? That's wrong, don't you know? And then he leaves them there, goes up to Galilee, sends the 12 disciples, and now his sermons are getting one level higher, where we talk about the Sermon on the Mountain. And we said send the 12. His sermons are getting a bit higher, and now we're doing better miracles, supernatural miracles, calming the storm. Any questions so far? I think I forgot one more thing in round 2. Sorry, calming the storm, walking on the water, and then he would actually, the devil, he wouldn't just cast out a devil. No, he would cast out legion, which is hundreds of devils stuck in one person. That's round number 2. Now let's go to round number 3, and that's like the boss level. That's like the khalas. We're nearly there. We're nearly there. Round number 3. So round number 3, where do we have to start? Where do we agree? Christ always starts in Judea, in the south, for the Passover. Always starts in the south. And now, George's question, that's when Christ actually tells the Pharisees, woe to you. Khalas. This is time for simple judgment. He tells them, woe to you, the woes. Why they've caused people to sin, you should be humble, all of this. Christ actually, I'm not going to say had the courage, but no, he had the people around him now. That's when he goes full on. Woes. The woes to the Pharisees, the scribes. That's down in the south. He goes to the woes, and then he teaches the Jews down in Judea that he is the true bread, the true manna. He tells them, not as your forefathers ate the manna in the desert at the time of Moses and died. No. I am the true bread of life. Whoever eats me shall live forever. And then they get a bit angry with him. How can you say that? How can you say that? Christ leaves them, goes back to Galilee. In round number 2, in round number 1, pick the 12 disciples. Round number 2, send the 12 disciples. Round number 3, what do you guys think he would do? Pick and send the 70 apostles. In round number 3, he would pick and send the 70 apostles. That's round number 3. Beginning of service, picks only 4. Round 1 of service, picks the 12. Round 2 of service, send the 12. Round 3 of service, which is the 3rd year, pick the 70 and send them to preach. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? In terms of miracles, so Christ raised the dead. Christ did all the miracles for the Jews. Legion, cast him out. The dead, cast him out. Walking on the water, done. What do you guys think he would do in round 3 to up that up? What do you guys think, in terms of miracles, what would happen in round 3? In round 3, in terms of miracles, Christ actually goes away from the Jews and starts healing the Gentiles. That's in round number 3. That's when he starts healing the Gentiles. And that's the commandment that we have to do. Like his word should spread in Samaria and all the Gentiles. That's what he commanded us in the book of Acts. So Christ actually starts by doing that, where he actually starts healing the Gentiles. And we actually also, in terms of the sermons, again, he goes now out and preaches to the Gentiles. And that's when we hear of the feeding the 4,000, not the 5,000. The 5,000 were Jews. Feeding the 4,000, they were from the 10 mudun, the 10 countries. They were not Jews. They were Gentiles. Did I forget anything else? No. So, end of service. So now we covered the beginning of service, round 1, 3 rounds. And now the end of service, Christ goes back to Judea for the Passover, and we start the journey of the Passion of Christ. Palm Sunday ongoing, all the way to the end. Any questions? We're done. But I just want to recap on the history quickly. Recap on the history. Let me just go back. All right. Let's recap on the history quickly. So we said that Christ lived on earth 33 and a half years. The first 30 years, we don't know too much. The second 3.5 years, that's when Christ does his service. We agreed we'll split it to 5. Beginning of service, rounds 1, 2, and 3, or year 1, year 2, year 3, or trip 1, trip 2, trip 3, and then the end of service. So, the beginning of the service with the baptism. We start with the baptism, and Christ picks his 4 disciples, Simon Peter, Andrew, James, and John. And then round 1 of the service goes back down to Judea for the Passover. He meets Nicodemus, and that's when he goes past Samaria. Over there, when he goes past Samaria, he meets a Samaritan woman, goes up, picks the remainder of 12 disciples, and starts preaching to the people simple parables, small groups, parables. Then round 2, or trip 2, or year 2, higher intensity. We go back down to the Passover, down in Judea, and then Christ here heals the lame of Bethesda. And the Jews start getting angry with him. Christ leaves them a little bit, goes back up. He goes back up to the north, goes back up to Galilee. He already picked the 12 disciples. So what would he do now? Send the 12 disciples. Christ before started preaching to the people in simple parables. What would he do now? In round 2, go a bit higher. What do we do now? Sermon on the mountain, the Beatitudes. Get them out instead of in small groups or in the synagogue. No. Now we're going to preach them on the mountains where there's going to be thousands of them. Okay? Disciples in round 1, picked. Round number 2, sent. Miracles, now they go a bit more supernatural. Instead of in round 1, many simple miracles. No, round 2 now is supernatural. Walking on water, calming the storm. The devil, legion of devils, casting out. Round number 3, which is the highest level, we go back down to Judea, to the south, and then we start with the Passover. Christ goes hard on the Pharisees, then goes up to Galilee. What does he do? In terms of disciples, he picked and sent them. What do we do now? Pick the 70 apostles and send them through. What do we do in terms of miracles? We've already done for the Jews. Now let's go heal for the Gentiles. And then actually, I think something I forgot. In terms of the sermons also, the sermons were not now about the kingdom of heaven. And they were not now the Beatitudes. Now he started telling the people about his crucifixion. About the Son of Man's crucifixion. Now he tells them the Son of Man will be crucified. And on the 3rd day he will rise from the dead. And then we end with the ending of service. The end of service. Christ goes down to the Passover in Judea. And that's when we start the Passion Week. All the start from Palm Sunday. Any questions? Any questions? Glory be to God. Thank you.
Oh, dear. Thank you, Matthew. Such an important thing that you get familiar with the journey. For those who have been blessed and went to Jerusalem, you saw a live 3D. You appreciate what Matthew is speaking about much more. In fact, the distance between Judea all the way to the north, the Galilee, looking about a roughly 2-hour drive journey, which is like, you can imagine like how long it will be for Christ and his disciples will be walking that distance by foot. So it's not just like around the corner. It's a long journey. It's a fascinating place. Wonderful things happen there. And the important thing is, if we can grasp from this is a lot of history and a lot of geography. The important thing is, the hope is that as Christ worked deeply in Jerusalem and moved them from one spiritual level to the other until they witnessed his resurrection, the hope is that this is happening in your own lives, that you then stay stagnant, that you also experience the power of Christ in your life. Year after year after year after year, you get to become more and more entwined with the Word of God and become more and more of a powerful Christian in the world. Not someone that lives for 80 years of their life and at the end, what have you learned? Nothing. What have you become? Nothing. It's wasted. Hopefully that doesn't happen to us. May the Lord bless you and strengthen you. Get familiar with the Word of God, and may it do wonders in your lives to make you excellent Christians in the world. God bless you and protect you, and glory be to Him forever. Amen. I'm not sure where the announcers are, but there's a camp. There's a camp coming up. The camp is coming very shortly. We are restricted that we are not allowed to have less than a particular number. I think it was 40. So at the moment we have 56 people that have enrolled. 60 people that have put their names up. But we must. So I've been told the registrations will close today, because the reason being is that if we can't commit to this facility, and then when we rock up, we don't have enough. We have only got 20 people that have paid. It's a problem because they're going to charge us for 40. So I'm encouraging you, if you put your name down, please go ahead and commit and pay. HSC students, we know that you've already been to a camp, so we're subsidizing your cost a little bit to help you to come and join us, because we don't want anyone to miss out. So if any of you is struggling at the moment and wants to come, please come and talk to me and we'll work something through. Don't let money be the issue that stops you from joining us, okay? When we go there, the hope is that we have a wonderful spiritual time. Topic is about discernment and the value of it and what it means. And we're praying that we have a wonderful spiritual camp together in fellowship to grow, as we spoke earlier, in that mindset. Okay? God bless you and protect you. Live with Filu. I'm not sure what is for food. Do you know? Pizza. Yes, sorry, Mike. There is food coming up, pizza outside, so hopefully you can enjoy that. And I think that's about it, really. All right, awesome. Let's pray, and then we'll let you go in peace. Ben Marco. So hopefully the screen comes up shortly, and we'll sing one hymn together, and then we'll conclude. Try to connect now, please. All right, it's Apple, so can you change the screen, please? Apple TV? Oh, okay, look, there is a technical problem, so is it a common hymn that everyone knows or no? Or you can lead us then.
O seeker to me, Jesus, forget your hunger and thirst. Your food is the bread of life, and your drink from his wounded side, and your drink from his wounded side, and your drink from his wounded side. Your food is the bread of life, and your drink from his wounded. You traveler, forget the past and go steadfast in the path. If you suffer on the road, remember, for you he died. Remember, for you he died. Remember, for you he died. If you suffer on the road, remember, for you he died. The trumpet will be heard soon, with the happiness and sounds of joy. A great feast above the clouds, and